Our first word in this group is ambivalence. If you are ambivalent, and thus you have ambivalence, it means that you feel strongly in both directions. You have feelings for this and feelings for that, and you just can't make up your mind sometimes. You feel both ways might be right or both ways might be wrong. In other words, you have mixed feelings. The origin of ambivalence is pretty important. It starts with a word, ambi or amphi, the Greek amphi, the Latin ambi. We use it a lot of ways to mean both. If you're ambidextrous, use both hands. If something is ambiguous, it has many meanings, both meanings. If you're an animal that lives both in the water and on the land, you're an amphibian. Ambi and amphi are very, very common prefixes. The other root of this is from the Latin valentia, which meant strength, val. We use val to indicate strength a lot. For example, if you're valiant, you're very strong with bravery. So from the two sources, ambi and val, we get ambivalence, which basically means you have strong feelings both ways. And that's exactly what ambivalence is. You sometimes can't make up your mind because you are ambivalence should be paired up with the fourth definition down, having contradictory feelings. It's a little different, but it means the same thing. You think this is right, but you think it might be wrong. Those are contradictory feelings. It means that you can't decide. Our next word is ameliorate. If you ameliorate something, you make it better. You make it more interesting, more satisfactory. You just make it better. It comes from the Latin, and the Latin word to make better was, believe it or not, melior. So it makes sense. To make better is to ameliorate something. It should be paired with the third from the bottom, to improve or to make better. It's a good word to use, by the way. Our next word is cadence. Generally, cadence means there's a smooth flow, a rhythmic flow of sounds or words, but in many ways it doesn't really have to deal with sound or words. It could be events in a metaphorical way. Generally, when you talk, your tone goes up and down. You may start really low voice and end with a high voice or something of that sort, but there is usually some sort of up and down or going up and falling of a tone. And that's the origin of the word cadence. It comes from the French, which they got from the Italian. Italians love music and the sound of the voice, and cadence actually meant to fall, so it's a falling of a voice. We now use it mostly with sounds, the cadence of her voice, but it sometimes is used in a metaphorical way, cadence of their thoughts. Generally, it's a positive sounding reference, though. Cadence should be paired with the sixth item down to rhythm. Our fourth word is conflated. To conflate means to merge into a single thing, a single entity. The origin of the word should be fairly obvious. You got the Latin prefix con, which means with, and the Latin root flare, which means to blow. A lot of you are already familiar with the word inflate. You inflate air into your tires. That's, you blow ends. That's the in, flare, flate. So it's to blow in. And conflate obviously means blow together, put together, fuse together. It makes sense in that case. A lot of flates in English, by the way. Conflate, inflate, deflate, and so forth. Conflated should be paired with the seventh definition down, to fuse into one entity, to merge. Our next word is goad. The word goad is used in several ways. Originally it was a stick with a pointed end, and sometimes in case you wanted to make a cow go in a certain direction, you would hit them with a stick or shock them with a stick, and that would sort of convince the cow they should go in one direction rather than another. That was a goad stick. But right now, and more commonly, we use the word goad to mean anything that sort of entices or encourages you to do a certain action. You can be goaded into giving a speech that you didn't want. You can be goaded into eating broccoli if you don't like it with a promise, I'll take you to. Like many words that sound awful, goad is not a pleasant sounding word. It's of Old English or Germanic origin. In this particular case, it's closer to Old Norse or Norwegian language. Remember that the languages in Northern Europe, Germany, England, and Norway and Denmark were all very similar. They're all Germanic in origin. The Germanic Norse word for spear was gord, so it comes from that. Somebody could easily goad me if they were pushing me around with a spear. Goad should be paired up with a very bottom definition, to urge, to provoke into action. Our next word is harbingers. Harbinger has two distinct meanings. They are similar, but they're distinct. Sometimes it's used as a person who goes ahead and makes themselves known or sort of scouts out ahead of the troop, particularly in an army. The more common meaning, though, is anything that sort of predicts or foreshadows a future event. And again, I want you to pay attention to that word foreshadow. It's an omen. It's usually something that should make you nervous. It might not be negative, but it should make you nervous as all get out. For example, throughout history, if there was a big battle coming up and you had a solar eclipse, the earth went dark, people would get very nervous because they thought that was a harbinger of defeat or something not really good that was going to happen. Sometimes the good thing happened, sometimes it didn't, but people thought it was a omen of something bad to happen. So in many cases, the word harbinger has a slightly negative perspective. The word itself has an interesting history. If you went out ahead of the army, you basically are trying to figure out where the army was going to stay the next day, where you were going to keep them. That's why it's very closely related to the German word harbor. Harbor means some place safe that you can stay. And from that, going out ahead, we get the idea of a predictive thing, because you could see things that were in front of what was going to happen with the battle. So it's an interesting word. I don't think you should learn it for any roots, because it's a very strange origin. It comes from all sorts of different sources, German, French, Frankish, so forth. But it is a word that does seem to appear quite a bit on standardized tests. The word harbinger should be paired with the very top definition, anything that foreshadows a future event. But again, it has a wider meaning than that. Our next word is malicious. We've already had the word mal and malevolent. Mal means bad, so you can sort of guess that whatever malicious is, it's a bad thing. If you have malicious intent toward your neighbor, you might want to hurt your neighbor. So it's definitely a negative word. The root, as we talked about before, is from the Latin mal, which means bad. And the word malicious should be paired up with the fifth definition down, malevolent, there you see it again, or harmful. Our next word is permeate. Permeate means to pass through something or every part of something. It means to go into every pore. Sometimes it means to soak up something, diffuse through something, but it has the concept of getting into something, permeate. It's used in a metaphoric way much more often than I think the physical way. For example, you could say this person's philosophy permeated every part of society. It went through and into every part of society. So you hear it that way more than the physical way, I think. Most people might think the physical way just means penetrate. So penetrate does have a metaphorical sense, though. The origin of the word comes originally from the Latin. You have the prefix per. Per generally means through or cut through something, so that makes sense. And you also have the root meare, which meant to pass. So In Latin, per meare actually meant to pass through, to cut through something. It should be paired up with the definition next from the bottom, to spread out or to pervade. Again, you see that per part there. And you get the sense that permeate doesn't necessarily just mean to go in, it means to completely encompass something. Our ninth word is pugnacious. Pugnacious means that you like a fight, like a good fight. It comes from the Latin word pugna, which meant to fight, and we still have it in English. If you've ever saw a dog with a really crunched up nose, sometimes we call that a pug nose. It looks like they actually were in a fight. They had their nose just really pushed in. You get the word pugilism, somebody who's fighting, a fancy word for a fighter. Pugnacious should be paired up with the second from the top, belligerent. Belligerent, again, is a fancy word for warlike. Bella was a Latin word for war. So pugnacious and belligerent are very similar words. They both indicate you're warlike or fighting, although pugnacious does not necessarily have to do with anything about war, and belligerent generally does. Our last word is winsome. Winsome, anything that ends with S-O-M-E, some, is usually of an Old English Germanic source. The some part, you hear it in a lot of words, bothersome, noisome, troublesome in English. It means something that concerns the win, but the win part really changed. Right now we think win means to win a victory. Hundreds of years ago, though, win meant joy, to have fun, to enjoy life. That's why winsome now means very sweet or very innocent, very charming, very engaging. You can have a winsome smile. It's a very nice thing to call somebody, to say they have a winsome smile. It should be paired up with the third one down on the list. The dictionary meaning is a charming or attractive. So that's number 10. Thank you. We'll do another 10 later.